In the city that never sleeps, the deadliest men don't wear masks. They wear smiles. And no one smiled like Gregory Scarpa. Until it was time to kill. He was called the Grim Reaper, not just a nickname but a sentence. Gregory Scarpa Sr., a born and bred Brooklyn hood, lived in a world where loyalty was currency, betrayal meant death, and the rules were written in blood. By the time the law finally caught up to him, Scarpa had buried secrets so deep even the FBI couldn't unearth them all. Because for more than 30 years, he was working for them too. But to understand Gregory Scarpa, you can't just look at the headlines. You have to walk the razor's edge where mobsters, feds, Harlem gangsters, and blood-stained diamonds all danced in the shadows. This is not just a story of murder. It's a story of seduction, double lives, and a criminal empire on the verge of civil war. Scarpa leaned back in his leather chair, a single gold ring glinting on his finger. Across the table sat a man who didn't blink, John Sonny Franzese, the old-school underboss of the Colombo family. They didn't like each other, but they respected one another. Franzese, fresh out on a parole technicality, had heard whispers. Scarpa had plans, big ones. Plans that involved diamonds, betrayal, and Harlem muscle. Franzese exhaled slowly. "You're walking into a storm, Greg. One you might not walk out of." Scarpa smirked. "I don't walk into storms, Sonny. I make them." The heist was Scarpa's brainchild, elegant, bloody, and precise. $1 million worth of uncut stones disappeared in under 7 minutes. But what made this job different was who was involved. Guy Fisher, a smooth-talking Harlem gangster with legitimate style and illicit roots. Fisher wasn't mafia, but he wasn't to be underestimated. He controlled territory, muscle, and the money that flowed through uptown nightclubs. Scarpa and Fisher formed a fragile alliance. It was risky, a white Italian mobster working with a black kingpin. But money didn't care about color. And diamonds? They sparkled the same in every palm. But while Scarpa was cutting deals with Harlem, the Colombo family was bleeding from within. By the early 90s, the family fractured into two camps, the Persico loyalists and the Arena faction. Scarpa, ever the soldier, remained loyal to Carmine Persico, even while the boss rotted in prison. His loyalty came with a body count. William Wild Bill Cutolo, a fierce Arena ally, marked Scarpa for death. But the Grim Reaper didn't scare easily. On a cold November morning, Cutolo's crew ambushed Scarpa's car in Brooklyn. What they didn't know was Scarpa always traveled with an Uzi in the glove box, and a driver ready to die for him. Bullets flew, but Scarpa survived. 2 shooters didn't. This wasn't just mob warfare. This was personal. Scarpa, already suspected by his own people for being too clean with the feds, doubled down. He used his FBI handler to track enemies. In exchange for tips about mob murders and rival families, the Bureau fed him intel on who was plotting against him. Carmine Sessa, once a loyal consigliere, began to question Scarpa's moves. He didn't like the Harlem connection. He didn't trust the diamonds. And when Scarpa's own son, Greg Jr., started asking too many questions, the walls began to close in. By 1992, the war left 12 men dead, countless families shattered, and the Colombo family in ruins. Gregory Scarpa was a walking contradiction. Murderer and informant, soldier and traitor, father and executioner. He died in 1994, HIV positive from a blood transfusion given by a mob-connected doctor, another irony in a life full of them. The feds would later admit, Gregory Scarpa was both their greatest asset and their greatest failure. By the fall of 1992, the bodies were stacking up faster than indictments. The Colombo War had become a public spectacle, car bombs in broad daylight, machine gun ambushes outside diners. But while the headlines screamed Mafia War, behind the curtains Gregory Scarpa was orchestrating something far darker. No longer just a soldier, Scarpa was a ghost general in a silent civil war. He'd become the Persico faction's sharpest blade, and with the FBI feeding him confidential intel, he was always 2 steps ahead of the bullets. But what the Bureau didn't know, or pretended not to know, was that Scarpa was using them to eliminate his rivals. And in the eye of this hurricane was a deal no one expected. Scarpa's Harlem connection with Guy Fisher was growing into something more dangerous than the war itself. Guy Fisher wasn't just any street kingpin. He was smart, polished, a businessman with political reach and celebrity connections. He wore suits tailored in Milan and could walk into the Apollo Theater or a federal gala and own the room. Scarpa saw something in him. Power. Reach. An opportunity to move the family beyond Brooklyn street corners and into corporate crime on a scale they'd never touched. "Colombo's bleeding," Scarpa told him one night over bourbon. "We don't have time to play by Sicilian rules anymore. You want in on real money? Real muscle? You come with me. We take the diamonds, the drugs, the Harlem clubs, we take it all." Fisher hesitated. He'd played his game clean for years, under the radar. But Scarpa's plan offered him something no one else had: access. The kind of access that could buy him immortality in both worlds. The heist was set, one of the largest black market diamond stashes on the East Coast, run through a shady Dutch-Israeli broker laundering stones through Midtown. Fisher would provide the safe house and muscle. Scarpa would deliver the plan, the leverage, and the threat. The job went off almost perfectly. Almost. One of Fisher's men, a guy named Reggie Slim Haynes, got greedy. Tried to fence a stone too early, drawing heat. Scarpa didn't ask questions. He just handled it, the way he always did. But that murder triggered a ripple effect. William Wild Bill Coutelot, sensing weakness in Scarpa's operation, began making overtures to Carmine Sessa, asking him to flip. Wild Bill hated Scarpa, always had. Thought he was too flashy, too reckless. And now, with Sessa's ear and law enforcement circling like sharks, it was only a matter of time. In the Mafia, betrayal doesn't whisper. It roars. Scarpa's Harlem dealings became the noose around his neck. Carmine Sessa, once a trusted consigliere, began taping conversations, detailing Scarpa's FBI ties, his rogue alliances, and most damning of all, the murders he committed while acting as a government asset. By 1993, it wasn't just the Colombos turning on Scarpa. It was the Bureau itself. They distanced themselves, quietly removed agents with Scarpa ties. One agent, Lindley DeVecchio, would later be accused, though never convicted, of feeding Scarpa information that led to murders. It was a scandal the FBI tried to bury. But the damage was done. Scarpa's world was collapsing. One murder, one tape, one betrayal at a time. In the final months, Scarpa was dying slowly. The HIV he'd contracted from a tainted blood transfusion, reportedly arranged by his own mob doctor, was eating him alive. His face sunk, his strength gone. He'd once been the Grim Reaper. Now he was a ghost in his own home. In the end, he wasn't arrested with a shootout or surrounded by feds. He was taken quietly, handcuffed while coughing blood, too weak to even curse. He didn't die in a hail of bullets. He died in a prison hospital bed alone. But don't mistake silence for peace. Gregory Scarpa left behind a crater, a family shattered, a mafia wounded, and a bureau humiliated. Sonny Franzese would later say, "I didn't like the guy, but I respected the way he played the game, until he started playing both sides." As for Guy Fisher, he went down on his own charges, sentenced to life in prison years later. But to this day, some believe he kept a stash. Diamonds from the heist, untraceable, unfound. Maybe they're buried somewhere in Harlem. Maybe they're in a vault in Antwerp. Maybe Scarpa took the secret to the grave. He was a killer, a traitor, a mastermind. Gregory Scarpa blurred the line between gangster and government weapon. In the end, no one really knew which side he was on. Only that if you crossed him, you'd never see it coming. Let's check out another mobster. Anthony Tico Antico never craved the spotlight. He was the type of gangster who preferred dimly lit diners and whispered meetings over loud suits and headlines. But don't mistake his silence for softness. Antico was a longtime captain in the Genovese crime family, one of the most disciplined and secretive branches of American organized crime. If you crossed him, you disappeared, and the story ended before it began. Born in Brooklyn and raised in the smoggy working-class corridors of New York's outer boroughs, Antico made his bones early. He was old school, tight-lipped, loyal to a fault, and violently efficient. By the 1990s, his operations ran through Staten Island and Brooklyn like veins. Extortion, gambling, shylocking, even a little union muscle. If you wanted to bet, borrow, or breathe in his neighborhoods, you went through Tico. But in the late 2000s, the game started changing. The Genovese weren't just dealing in street rackets anymore. They were bleeding into cybercrime, real estate scams, and banking. And Antico, even in his 70s, wasn't ready to retire. He was ready to cash in. Detective Tyson Guzman was NYPD through and through. Street smart, good-looking, sharp as a switchblade. But the badge on his chest hid a secret, a festering resentment. Guzman had grown up poor in the Bronx, surrounded by gangsters who lived better than the cops chasing them. Somewhere along the way, he stopped chasing and started protecting. Guzman was a cop who could make problems disappear, for a price. His partnership with Antico didn't start with a handshake. It started with a tip. A low-level bookmaker who owed Antico money was under surveillance. Guzman made the wiretap vanish. After that, the money flowed. Trips, watches, envelopes tucked in glove compartments. Then Antico asked for more. It started as a whisper in a Staten Island social club. What if we hit a bank? Not a smash and grab, not a sloppy takeover. This would be clinical. Inside information, clean getaway, no bodies. The target was a Midtown Manhattan bank with a vulnerable branch vault and a rotating security staff. The plan needed three things: timing, silence, and someone inside the NYPD to steer the investigation off course. Antico had the crew. Old-timers, loyal and precise. He brought in John Johnny Sausage Barbato, another Genovese stalwart known for his quiet efficiency and terrifying calm. Barbato had served his time and kept his mouth shut. Now he was back, hungry and useful. Guzman would be the linchpin. He provided blueprints, insider police briefings, and details on security schedules. He'd stall the response time, erase surveillance feeds, file false reports. For a man who lived his life on the edge of both worlds, it was a natural evolution. It happened at 3:12 a.m. on a cold Monday in March. The city slept. The streets were slick with rain. 2 vans pulled into a side alley. 5 men went in. None came out for nearly an hour. When they did, they left behind an empty vault and a shredded security system. Over $5 million in bearer bonds, cash and safety deposit contents were gone. No one was killed. No alarm was tripped. By 7 a.m., Detective Guzman was one of the first on the scene. He looked concerned, professional, focused, but he knew exactly what they wouldn't find. No prints, no footage, no trail. It should have been the perfect crime. They didn't count on the 6th man. A runner named Ricky DeSoto, a neighborhood guy with a gambling habit and a big mouth, had been used as a lookout. And Ricky talked, to a girlfriend, to a cousin, and eventually, to an undercover agent posing as a loan shark. One thing led to another, and soon Ricky was on tape bragging about the job, name-dropping Antico, Barbato, and a cop who made it all disappear. The feds didn't move right away. They watched. They built a case. Months passed, wiretaps accumulated, and slowly the puzzle came together. The arrests came quietly in the early morning hours. Anthony Antico was picked up outside a bakery in Staten Island. He didn't resist, didn't speak, just nodded and stepped into the cuffs. John Barbato was taken at his cousin's house in Jersey. No words, no drama. Detective Tyson Guzman was arrested during a night shift. When Internal Affairs walked into the precinct and read the warrant, the room went still. He looked around. No one said a word. Guzman just exhaled, took off his badge, and handed it over. The indictment hit like a thunderclap. Conspiracy to commit robbery, racketeering, obstruction of justice, and aiding organized crime. The headlines screamed NYPD corruption, mafia heist, betrayal in blue. Antico died not long after. Still under investigation, still denying involvement, still refusing to flip. He took most of the truth with him. Guzman took a plea deal, rolled over halfway, and disappeared into witness protection. Barbato, always the soldier, served his time quietly. Of the $5 million stolen, only $700,000 was ever recovered. The rest? Maybe in Europe, maybe in Cuba, maybe buried under a Staten Island parking lot. The Genovese family took the hit but stayed standing.